Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the press. My name is Larry Warren. 20 years ago, in 1980, I was a security specialist assigned to RAF Bentwaters, Woodbridge, NATO Air Force facilities in Suffolk, East Anglia. I had a secret security clearance. I guarded our backline nuclear weapons that were stored there at the time, without the knowledge of the people of Great Britain. I went through a portion of a 3-night UFO event where objects made incursions over our WSA, fired pencil-thin beams of light into them, and adversely affected the ordnance, possibly. These objects were on the ground on 2 different nights. Potentially there was another life form seen. This is an unpopular truth. These events were of extreme defense significance to not only Her Majesty's government, but this government as well, and they are still shrouded in secrecy. They are very complex, they are very vast. This is more about a human rights issue than just a UFO issue. 20 years ago, this room would be empty. I see a turn in history. This is history in motion, but unfortunately it's history with a security classification. I would be more than honored to swear under oath that I experienced what I did, I saw what I saw. These events produced not only, after numerous denials by this government, a memo by Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, our deputy base commander, which reads like science fiction. It also produced, years later, an on-site audio tape he made as these objects performed their feats and did what they did and violated airspace. These events are of extreme defense significance. I hope my brothers in arms that went through these events will be given immunity at some point and be able to join us here. It is an honor to share the stage with all of these people. And I think for all of our children, my son Dennis, God bless you, son, we can change the world. You're heroes for being here also, and I will testify in front of Congress if asked to. God bless. Thank you.
Larry Warren, good evening in the UK. How are you?
I'm fine. Great. Good to see you, Joe. I see you.
How's the weather in UK?
It's not great today. It's raining today, but normally we have pretty good weather over here. Funny enough, it's kind of, people think it's fog and all that, but and high tea, but it's a shitty day today. Whoops, I said shit. Damn.
Right.
Oh, God,
you've been
crappy day, Joe.
You've been living there since '99.
Yeah, 23 years.
And you're a New York boy.
I was born in the Bronx in New York, and I lived in Manhattan, and I've lived. I'm in New York City. Yeah, and I've lived in other parts of New York and Massachusetts, Connecticut. I've lived in California. I've lived in your neighborhood. I've been all over Gypsy, but I've been here a long, long time. I'm in the Beatles' hometown, Liverpool.
So tell us about your childhood in New York. I feel like a lot of interviews with you, I've listened to all of them, and they don't get into the core of who you are growing up in New York, your childhood, your appreciation for rock and roll. Let's get into that. Tell us about your childhood.
Well, I grew, it was a pretty normal. I'm adopted. My sister is. I got 2 stepbrothers or whatever. They're just family anyway. And that's a long time ago now, 61 years. But normal life. Lived outside, just outside the city, and but again, with the subject at hand, of course, and I'm from a very conservative family. My parents are from Boston, Mass, and that in their generation, Depression era kids, very conservative people. And a very, very business, straight shooting family, totally. I have a lot of law enforcement in my family. I have a lot of engineers and all that, my extended family. And a lot of family in Boston, tons. And hello to them. And just a normal kind of life in the 60s, as for a kid. However, I did, as I wrote in my book, have this thing, this phenomena in my life. Didn't know what it was. We didn't have any books on paranormal. Remember, this is in the 60s, any of that kind of thing. And you go, not every day, I don't remember being in crafts and like Travis, any of that stuff. And thank God, but I've had more than anyone should experiences. I never needed the Rendlesham Forest incident at all to know the stuff's real. I don't know what it is. They always say, I say alien. Never said that. I don't know what it is at all, but it's alive and it's freaky and scary. And I still see things, and it goes on with people in my life. So they see things, they don't like it always, but it's just the nature of people like us, perhaps you. I mean, many people I know like that. I just happen to go through a thing that's very controversial and very famous, I guess, in this subject. And normal life. I've been married twice to great women, got a great son. He's a Liverpool guy. He's my Beatle, I call him. He's 21. He's pretty fierce boxer.
He's a boxer. He's a great boxer, I hear.
I wouldn't want to get hit by him. I don't know what makes Ali's a great. I stood behind Tyson once in a bar in Columbus Avenue in New York, and I tapped him. I said, "I got to meet." He was the champ then. And I said, "I got to shake his hand." He wasn't that tall, but man, he was like, it was a house. And I said, "God, I hope he's in a good mood." He turned around. There was that high voice. "Oh, how are you?" So I don't mess with boxers, but yeah, he's got a great whack on him. I'm not. I was a hockey player. So we just brawled, man. That was it. It's not like a street fight.
Where did your son get an interest in boxing? When did that all start? I'm fat for the listeners that don't know. I could sit and talk boxing all day, all night.
Oh, he got into that at about, a friend of mine is the older brother of the heavyweight champion, John Conti, the British champ. And I know John, and of course, Frank was French Foreign Legion. So, I mean, they're not half measures. And I went to, we were invited to an event in a fundraiser for some charity in Liverpool. And there were 5 ex-world champions at it. Frank, John fought Ali and all that. So I went, and John spent a good hour, Conti, with my son. And from then on, I didn't get it from me, but he was right in the boxing. He's built his own gym, he's all that kind of thing. He knows about it. I think Jack, Rocky Marciano, or one of them, that's his number one guy, the hard hitter. I wouldn't want to get hit by any of them.
So you were around your son's age. Let's rewind here to your high school days, and then we're going to jump into to your Air Force. Tell us about your high school days in New York, I believe.
Yeah, New York, and I was in the, I moved to that high school. I was in hockey, ice hockey, and we were all being groomed. It was a bit of a brawler, but I could have been I was a much better player than I showed. I was always, I'll fight anyone back then. And I moved up with my mother, and I went. They didn't have a hockey program. Now they do. So they pretend apparently that it's always been there. It wasn't. It was all football, baseball, all that. And so I got in a rock and roll band. My first band was in about 74 or 5, and we were terrible, but we had. It was just great fun. Some of my friends from that band, were still friends of mine now. And I was in many, and I was in a pretty good sized band. It could have gone somewhere. But I'd already enlisted in the Air Force because I figured, who knew, you're not going to make it. Yeah, that was it. It was good, normal, good times, innocent times, different times than now. I mean, a big thing for us was, a keg party and things. And, it was a different world. It was like, the Cheech and Chong era, wasn't it? They were our idols. We go to see the midnight movies. A lot of my friends from that time have passed away, sadly, in the last few years, not just the COVID thing or whatever, but we're at that point. So it's a shame. And a lot of fun. I had more fun outside of the classroom than in it. I had my best subject I excelled at was definitely not math, but it was history and all that. And my teacher, I wanted to quit high school. I was so bored with it by 16. Had a single mother and all, and they were hardworking women doing the best they can with the kids. I said, oh, hell with this. I'm getting out of here and going in the Army because you could get in at 16. And I had all these teachers sit around and, they had heat on my mom, who's a single mother, but believe me, she could handle her own end. But that's what they do. They always pick on the single mothers and things. And my social studies teacher, who was still a dear friend of mine, John Strow, was retired now. He still looks the same. I don't know how he does it. Said, I don't know about everyone else, but Larry's my best student. And that kept me in high school. That made me, there was that one teacher, if you have one of them, you're blessed. And he was the one that kept me going further, I was just bored with the thing. I wanted to get out in the world. I wasn't stupid, but unless when it came to math. And I got thrown out of 9th grade math, I think in 11th grade, they said, forget it, go. And I'm from a family of accountants and things, so it doesn't add up. So we, and what else do you want to know? I still have nightmares. I can't graduate because I didn't complete gym class. I swear to God. I've been out of high school 45 years, man. 43.
So eventually you must have hit a crossroads where it was either Army or Air Force. Let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't that way. I just, no university was going, we have to have Larry Warren. Your grades are just so superior. Please come and learn with us. Yeah, the letter never came anyway. Maybe they sent it. And sure enough, we had an incident. You weren't on Earth yet. Not your fault. In November of 19. Now, my mother, being from Boston, she would have liked me to go in the Navy, but I get seasick on a duck pond. Believe me. My cousin Billy, if you're listening, you remember in Boston Harbor in 1980. Ooh, I still thinking about it, Joe. I get seasick. But we had this thing, and where the Iran, the Revolutionary Guard, took over the U.S. Embassy. And now remembering this is about 4 years after Saigon fell, Vietnam had ended. So it was not a popular thing to go into the service. I didn't know many in my high school class that were going. A number of us did, but the majority were the continuation of high school, basically, is what I think university is at that age. Toga, right? And it sure would have been that way if I got there. But they that really pissed me off. I mean, seeing them humiliate our. See, I'm very patriotic. Grew up in a patriotic family. My father served, relatives served. And people find that strange because of the Rendlesham thing and the abuse of power that went on. But I'd still fight. If I could do it, I'd fight and die for my country any day. Maybe not the current president, but I'll leave that alone. But it goes half your audience. But so I got real mad and I went down. Now, before that, I had gone to England as an exchange student. So I wasn't that dumb. And I went to a town called Billericay. It's in Essex. And we got to go to London and we had an experience. We had an exchange program with that high school. And I think my mother had, it was like $450. And she had, it was a lot of money for a single mother, And off we went, and it changed my life. I'm the biggest British music fan there is, and just seeing certain sites, and I broke away from the groups in London. I went on my own way around London. That's how I was. I was really a problem child. I said, I don't want to be in a tour group. I want to go to, Savile Row, see the Beatles offices. I want to go. London was a very different place back then. So I was hooked on England. So when the hostage thing happened, that was in early 79 or late 78, something like that. In November of 79, when the hostage crisis took place, it literally just motivated me. Now I wanted to go into a combatant role, So I found out the Air Force had numerous bases at the time in the United Kingdom. And so I went down to the recruiter. I remember his name to this day, Jack Gorman, and you never forget him. And I was the Army maybe, but they got me talked into the security specialist field. It's 81130. Now, when you hear about Rendlesham Forest, you hear about law enforcement or LE. That's not what we were. They're kind of the cops on the gates and arrests, patrol guys. We were combatants. We retake air bases. We were trained to counter Alpha Team Spitznaps and all kind of theoretical things. It was the height of the Cold War. So I chose that field, and I was, at least that's what they told me, I was the last person to get, because they tried to have incentives for you to go into the service. So I signed up for 6 years, so I wasn't messing around. It wasn't a fly-by-night thing. And I got 2 stripes, which is the Airman First Class, after I got through basic. Now, I've seen, the internet weakness and trolls and the community and all that I never even went to basic training anyway. It's madness what the subject is like now. And not just for me, it's just a mad bunch. And I blame the little laptops there and Mr. What's his name? Pointy head out there, your way. What's his name? Anyway, Zuckerberg and his friends. Off we go. The camera go. Just one blank show, you're done. And so away from all that. So I signed up. My band, I talked 2 friends into going in. One has passed away recently. Jeff went into my job field. Steve, who is in heaven now, went to Keesler Air Base. I think it was some kind of air traffic control school or something. So off to Texas we went. My band, the Sweet River Band, did its last triumphant concert in Shepherd Park to 4,000 damn people. I mean, it was a tourist night, but man, we were lucky. And it was so cool. And it was that memory where childhood ends, and it just worked out. Even though we messed up doing Freebird, and it was like the whole band screwed up at once. It was like a record skipping. Anyway, we still talk about that. So off we went. And there was one song that Mike LaPointe wrote, and I won't mention it here, but I said, "You can't sing that. My mother's in the audience. That's on the tape." So those innocent days. And so I left for the Air Force and went to Albany, had my ticket to ride and all that. Jeff showed up, Steve showed up, and we flew on, we swore in. And already, you have to remember, the draft was over, but back then we had selective service. So we still had to register for the draft in my era. All of us. And it would, so that I don't think exists in America now, does it?
I signed up for selective service, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm not sure
Okay.
kids do still. I'm not sure about that, but because I did it in 2007.
Isn't that funny? I didn't know if that was some spillover from the Nam era that, we were just after that, And so anyway, off to the Air Force we went down in Texas, and I had 2 buddies, and we all ended up in the 3702 BMTS squadron. It was the hottest summer in Texas in 100 years. I've never been to Texas. We flew down on American, what was it called? The airline's long gone. Anyway, we flew down, changed in Pittsburgh, flew down. And I kept worrying my bags weren't going to be there. And it wouldn't have mattered because they took them all off. Jail is the closest thing off to Leavenworth, right? Or Alcatraz. And you change, and you just do. And then it becomes real. And I remember calling my mother from San Antonio Airport. They said, "You can make a call." And I said, I made a mistake. I'll come back. And so that didn't happen. And we get on the base, and boom, boom, boom. Here we are. We get assigned to our squadron. And we had the 6 weeks of, at that time, so it's longer now, 6 weeks basic training. However, it's not the woke era I came up in. My instructors were all Vietnam veterans that were ex-US Marine Corps. So they brought the Corps to us. You know, a lot of people think the Air Force is, no, not in my era, it wasn't. They're scary boys. They were cool though. Vincent Garza was my instructor, and Sergeant Harvey was the other one. He didn't like New Yorkers, I remember. And we had all the dynamics of the Southern guys, the guys from California. You may know Steve Longero, the witness to Rendlesham, retired policeman. He's from up your way, Milpitas, you know, and he's a one top guy, man. But we all met then, you know, when we were kids, little kids. But you can look at pictures of us going in. I was lucky to have this pictures of me getting my hair cut off. I think you saw them. I don't like to advertise though. And
I did see
because,
those,
yeah, they had a photographer. All the barbers had Elvis haircuts, which was not a good sign. We all had 70s, hey man, kind of hair. And boy, they had fun with us right down the middle. And you look like Bozo the Clown. I don't know if your era knows who he is. And there you are, man. And you know, I had my new Adidas sneakers back then. They're leather, and they made us take a shower with them. I said, "Oh, these were expensive." I didn't bring the flip flops. So I'm not wearing those. They're for girls. Well, you know, making my own rules again. I had to wear my Adidas, so I'm marching, and water's squirting out of them all the way up to the thing. And these are things you never forget. We got through basic. It was so hot down there, Joe, man. I'm from the East Coast, and it gets tropical hot. But this was superhuman hot, 100-something Texas hot. And we got through it, had a few laughs. I was amazed. There were times I wanted to just run away. A lot of funny stories. We'd still talk about them now. I often wonder how many of those guys, you know, how many are still on Earth? And I was 18 years old, younger than myself. And the next thing that happened, we crossed the road. We went to the Security Police Academy at the same base in Blackland. After, I think we had a weekend off, and then it was right in there. And now we wore berets and all. We had to earn all that. It wasn't like, here you go. You know, none of that. You had to earn it. A lot of it was classroom law procedures. But again, my job, the law enforcement sector had their own academy. Ours was a combatant academy, you know, so we're dealing with M203s, M60 machine guns, the Vietnam era M16s. We didn't use sidearms, and back then the sidearms were 38 cal. Not like the Glocks and all. I never heard of a Glock. And we were range. The picture I sent you with the firing range, that was basic training. Now, you had to have a basic proficiency in there, because a majority of the job roles were not combatant. You wouldn't have a gun. They're tech or airfield support, not us. That was nothing. That was all 22. We trained on NATO rounds. We saw the EOD blowing up trucks, and how to hit the ground. I mean, man, it was all real world. Simulated combat, retaking buildings. I put a lot of these videos on that page, that group I had, of training from that era, because I think a lot of UFO fans, you know, the entertainment seekers, that kind of thing, which frankly, there's a lot too many of that, teachers own. They don't think of who we are, because on these TV documentaries, we're presented as, you know, frankly, one guy they had playing me on a good one from Canada, but the guy looked like Pee Wee Herman, and you know, it just, and he's on his own one. You know, narrative is always controlled by the storyboard writers, never the people on it, except Charles Halt. He could control the narrative with any show. That's something to think about. But he won't be controlling a show coming up, which ain't a show. But yeah, and so we went through all that. 6 weeks in, we earned our beret. Graduation, I went to advanced combat training, which was ABGD, Air Base Ground Defense, at Fort Sam Houston, which is the Army base. A lot of Green Berets there and all that. And Ranger and all. It's an Army base. And we're in real MASH tents. Now the kids down there, they have beautiful little college things and bathroom. We had tarantulas in our head, man. There was no door on it. And the only women, now the women and guys are all together and they're wearing pink shirts and selfieing each other. I'm talking men too. And they're in this is now, I look at that, I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then we go to our weekend fun was at the rundown Shotgun Shack. A lot of Green Berets, and I mean, dudes with patches on their eyes and scary dudes. And I kept talking with them, and they tell me all kind of wacky stuff.
Were they? I'm sure they were combat Vietnam veterans. Some of these.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Well, I think the special forces, the Army, and ours, the Air Force, did. We were elite force. We were not special forces, and they would do all kind of training. They had bomb ranges down there for the aircraft to drop bombs. And we had facilities that looked like weapon storage areas. They recreated them, and we had to defend them and, go into buildings and all, clear buildings, all the stuff, fun stuff that I couldn't even consider doing now. And so, yeah, the Green Berets, they stood out even when I was a kid. Our neighbor, Artie Quinlan, was a Green Beret, and I just was in awe of that guy, because it's not a half measure, is it? And so, yeah, talk to them. And, these were older guys, so they weren't new in it. They were probably instructors or something. And they had definitely seen things they wouldn't have told me about. And I've known a few in my life anyway, operators. And I said a good friend of mine's French Foreign Legion, retired. So they're mad boys. So anyway, we finish up, we get our badge, the actual badge. And then you're assigned, and I was assigned to RAF Bentwaters. Initially, I was assigned to Alconbury in England. And somehow they did a crafty thing, very strange, never understand. They flipped the assignment. This guy goes, oh, and you can't do that in the Air Force. But they did. And so off to Bentwaters. I said, is that close to London? Because I'm thinking concerts, the Who, someone I'm going to be close to. And it was. And so I took that, and it was probably the worst duty assignment in England. In fact, it was considered a lot of the buildings looked like World War II Quonset huts. The bases are shut down and closed many years now, but after I left, God, they got Burger Kings on there. They had all our burgers came from the bowling alley, which are really good if I remember. And we had movie theater, and we have the All Ranks Club. And when you're off, I was in there a lot, and. But I go to London when I could get away. I got the hell on the train in Ipswich, down to London, about 80 miles, spent the weekends there. It was like, whoopee, freedom,
Tell us a little bit about the women back then in London.
Yeah, the women anywhere. It was, you're young and free, man. I discovered my special purpose back then. And yeah, they was good. It's good to be young, Joe. That's all I can say. They were fun times. There were different times. It was pre-AIDS, the AIDS thing, and it was there was nothing a pill couldn't cure. And you didn't think of it. We just had fun. It was a lot of fun, even on the airbase. And even there was all those things. You gotta remember, we're young guys still. However, you look at a picture of me as a young dumbass going into the service. Thinking you're a rock star or whatever the hell we thought then. And then you see after tech school, and when you're on your base, not a year later, there's a whole different face on that neck, a whole different person to a degree. Security for we were party animals. We had a lot of fun. And so I was on that base. I got there. Ask me anything, Joe, because I'll just drift off. I remember I was canceled 5 years ago before it was popular to be canceled. So thanks for uncanceling me, and it's a pleasure because I respect you.
Absolutely, it's an honor.
Maybe not too much about women.
Let's get into the opposite of women and get a little bit into Charles Halt. When did you meet him? How soon did you meet him?
Oh,
yeah,
right.
this is like total polar opposite here. But let's jump into Halt because he is a huge part of the story.
Well, he is. He's a huge part of something anyway. Bless his heart.
The cover up, at least, to say the very least, he's a huge part of the cover up. I should rephrase that.
Oh yeah, that's clear there. But I would have met Charles Halt, who was a lieutenant colonel, on my, either the first day on Bentwaters. I flew over. I landed December 1st, Now you remember had all my advanced training, then everything's on the job. I've always said he wasn't on long enough to be, well, there's other guys involved that flew over with me, I trained with. How come they were involved? It's just a personal beef. You find out why. So on my first day, we had a meeting, first morning, in the club, and all the high ranks that were available came and introduced themselves, because there were families there. There were a lot of different jobs, people with different jobs that were all new on the base. And it was an introduction to Bentwaters. And I think Charles Halt, because he was the deputy base commander, probably we saw him that day. And he entered, and the wing commander, Gordon Williams, very controversial, California guy, by the way, he's passed away sadly. Who was he? Was he not? Well, he was. But anyway, that's another thing. And so we would have met Halt then, but I wouldn't have dealt with him, though he hung around the police. So I met my chief of security police, Malcolm Ziegler, who was definitely CIA involved, turned out. They'll put agents into a role in the military. I never knew that went on, but it actually is true. And he's never come back after anyone denying. Of course, he's long retired. I hope he's still with us, because we're dropping like flies. And we met the base structure. And later that morning, we went to the security police office and met Carl Drury. He was the number 2 lieutenant, first lieutenant. I forget what he was, major. He wasn't very friendly. And, we got our assignments. I was C and D flight, 4 shifts. But of course, I couldn't start. So I had 2 weeks of incoming base familiarization training on Woodbridge, our sister base. Attend them, sign off, boom. In that interim, my security clearance came in. And that allows you to work on the flight line, alpha areas, not in the WSA. I never was asked to. I don't think I had that other level of clearance yet. It hadn't come. But I was out in the flight line. I got that on the 15th of December, have all the documents. I know I've heard that I forged my military record. I'd be doing money, folks. I wouldn't be doing my military record. $100 for anyone. But the subject, man, it is weak, man. Weak. Too weak for its own good, and at the expense of businesses. Sorry, bud. You'll never work again in that business. But it's the truth. I've been in it 40 years. So Halt would come around if you were on duty, and I rode with law enforcement, established guys, and we busted a party at his house. He hates me for that still. And I went in. We had the big rig guns. I had my 16, and then the law enforcement, and we just happened to have them on him. I'm riding shotguns, and there was a big wild party at the all the officers' kids did whatever they wanted, obviously, and they had housing, and it was at Halt's house or his neighbor right next door. It was a big thing, and my face was locked in with his right away, instantly, not knowing that in a few weeks, what's going to happen.
Exactly.
Of course, he didn't either. So he wasn't known as a bad guy. He was, as far as I know, I found him on the base. I found him very pleasant. Yeah. And so on New Year's Eve, 81, with Halt again, it was after the incidents. And the female barracks were off limits to us after 12, which didn't stop me, frankly. So I'm in there partying on the top floor off my head. I hid champagne bottles around the base. I never got to, I think, them. They're probably still there. And Halt came doing a patrol with a guy, Rick Bertolino, as a sergeant. I think he was a sergeant, coming down the hall. And I said, oh, hell. And I got in the refrigerator, the little stand-up fridge. And I said, tried to shut the door. And he opened it and said, Airman, you gotta go. So I came out and I walked out, and I wrote this in my book, which is true. And another woman I knew, a girl on the first floor, said, hey, where are you going? I said, your way. And I jumped into her window and passed out on the floor.
You
Happy
broke her stereo too, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I hit her girl things in the stereo, and I'm sure there was laughter. And I don't remember anything after that point. But again, this is Joe, just to qualify, it was just people were going wacky. Steve Plume, after the event, those of us that had gone through elements of this, we were off our caboose.
Right. And you were totally dealing with PTSD from what had just happened.
That expression, that expression didn't exist then. And again, it's about, you have to remember when the incident, you want to get to that?
So what were you doing the moments before everything totally went upside down? Let's start from that point. What were you doing minutes before the incident in the Rendlesham forest?
Yeah, I was on duty. My rotation just started again. I was off 2 days, three. We worked 6 on, 3 off. So I was 3 off 3 days. So 2 of those days were the first 2 nights. I had no knowledge of them. And they did happen. It's where people have taken them for whatever reasons. But they did happen. But they involve a lot more people than John and Jim and all that stuff. But that's their thing. I respect them as veterans. They did go through stuff, but you know that dynamic anyway. I don't do pretty bows and tie things up for people because 42 years later, I still don't know what the hell it was, man. So I'm on duty and I'm on a remote at the end of Bentwaters flight line called Perimeter 18. It was P-18. It was a concrete bunker dug in. We were in an alert condition that's been proven by pictures I took that morning showing on the main gates. Alert. Of course, it's the Cold War too. A lot of things were heating up in Poland with the Russian tank battalions coming to the border. Cold War, folks. Cold War. A lot of younger people. I'm not talking about you, but the subject, there's not a lot of knowledge of the history of the subject or history in general that goes along with it, because you have to know the whole bag. So we're really in hot times that Christmas, more than even I realized. Honestly, it was, you just don't know. We were a first line strike base. Our A-10s were designed to kill tanks. They all fly off, would go to Germany. F-111s would fly in and grab the nuclear weapons, tactical bombs we weren't allowed to say we had, but we stored on Bentwaters, because you don't keep your asset with the delivery device with the nukes separate. So it was only a little hop, skip, rabbit off, bomb the rescues, right? Thank God that didn't happen, but it was close all the time. So I'm on this post, and you check in every 10 minutes, 15 minutes to Central Security Control, CSC we call it. And I heard we have a big speak-ads tower that was you see it in the documentaries, it's still there, in the weapons storage area. And that has it's 80 feet. You can see off to the other base, which is about, I forget about, it's a clip to the other base and through the forest. And they were reporting those lights are back. And I'm like, I was interested in UFOs. I didn't know what they were talking about. And I'm alone. So I'm thinking, what the hell's this? So I'm looking around. I wrote it in the book. I saw these deer. We had lower fences than you see in the 80s with the terrorist thing. They upgraded the fences, more lethal. And back then, you could just jump over them. And I think it was community relations, because we had some wealthy landloaders that got mad when planes were too loud and they wouldn't fly them. I mean, that was being stationed in this way. Keep the natives, happy. And so I got picked up. They said, Aaron Warren, clear your posts. Bruce England, lieutenant at that time, ex-U.S. Army, U.S. Marine. Adrian Bastinza, they're in the front, 2 guys in the back. You know who they are. If I skip things, just because in the movie, there's things that are exclusive. So a lot of people wanted to come forward finally. And people aren't going to like it. Is it funny for a subject that really wants it all, they really don't want nothing? They don't. It's weird. Sorry, I know. This is my views, not Joe Cerletti's.
No, it is. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
The mistake you make is trying to please that type of person. There's very nice people. We can get into my years in this. Very nice people. I met my son's mother through all this. So, how bad can I get my son through it all? But, in reality, it's never been nastier. It's never been so full of slander and defamation, where it's unchecked. unless you're a millionaire, you can be suing everyone all over the world. And, and not everyone, it's not about belief, but when they get into your family, your job and life and twist things right around, I've learned a lot about the human condition more than UFOs, a lot about humanity. So anyway, I get picked up and we go to the base motor pool and they gassed up these light-off, the 2 wheels on the generator and with spotlights. It lights up aircraft on the flight line. And we took them, boom, off to I'm cutting this short, but because people are familiar pretty much. And a number of us vehicles went off to the east end of RAF Woodbridge. And I was familiar. I never worked on Woodbridge except going to the courses there for coming on your flight. And that forest, which is Rendlesham Forest, right? I say this over and over again. None of us knew the name of that. It was just woods. It wouldn't have meant anything to us at all. I just saw the tree, never thought about it. And then we went down past where the Eastgate Road broke left, where the gate is, where it all began 2 nights before, which on Burroughs. You'd have to see the lay of the land. And then we got down and turned left into the forest. And I'd never been in it. Flying down this narrow track of the trees. Remember, the forest was wiped out in 87 by a big hurricane they said wasn't going to come. And I'm not into the weather weapon thing. That was someone else's trip I let happen. I should know. Weather happens, right? And so the forest, they try to sell you now as being just what it was. And here's the landing site. And here's the little UFO model now that the kids play on. None of that existed then. Not even the lay of the land. That's not even accurate to anything. But it's how the subject is, and that's how people are. I avoid it because they have these little UFO trails. There were no trails then. This is where the guys went. No. So we encountered. We got off the vehicles, turned in our weapons to Red Hats. Red Hats were firearm guys and maintained them. We weren't allowed to have weapons off the base, but we did. And we broke up into groups, went into the forest. Charles Halt came up to our group at one point and got Lieutenant England, who you hear England with him on his audio tape. And they went a whole different direction with the party he was at. So I saw him that night. I remember asking him in DC years ago, I said, you wear glasses at night? Where's contacts? And aviators, and he just wouldn't answer me. He knew exactly what I was saying, but we came to, we're going through the woods. I'm thinking, what the hell is this, an exercise? But then time slowed down, Joe. Time got slow. I've said it for 42 years. Can't describe it, can't prove it, but it happened. Everything got very molasses, very green state. I think it was the defense this phenomena had to control the environment. The environment bent a little bit. I think of things now. You hear my story's been the same. I always say, right, yeah, he changes the story. Man, other people, I've never changed. That's the boring thing. I never have. It must be tiresome to hear this. I'd like to add something to it, but I think of things in more depth now. And it was a bend to the atmosphere. It wasn't right, the whole thing. My watch stopped, very common in this stuff, my Timex. And we came to a clearing. There was a big old oak tree, which still is there. It was, the lower branch is still there. And I think it might be a dead tree. It must be. And was lit, and there was this glowing yellowish green mist as part of the ground. It looked like a mist. You could see through it. It wasn't a solid thing. I've seen things that looks like platforms and a pancake or an asteroid. Come on. And there it is. And I'm like, but again, your normal thought process wasn't normal. So you're thinking, what the hell is this? And you weren't that way. It was like, what is this? Very strange. Guys next to me, Bastins is on my right. Other guys, all but Robert Paul, my shift supervisor, all out there, real human beings. He even said we saw vehicles containing people or another life form. He said that on CNN. I'm not the only one. And yet, ignore him. There was so much to this thing. And what I did notice is that there were cameras, video cameras, and a motion. I'm not an expert on this stuff. The filmmaker, Deanne Johnson, obviously is trade. knew exactly what I was talking about for that era. I just saw one, must have been a video, like you saw at news reports. And I think they knew this stuff. Well, obviously it was going on 2 days. I didn't know. And this red light, there was a farmer's house. There was a dog barking outside it, a light on the upper floor, and way out to the left, the far left, other end of the field. It's a big, big field. And then there's a big field behind it, which is part of all this too now. I didn't know that. And this orange light, the North Sea is out there. Now, between the house and the stand of trees that comes out toward the landing or whatever it is in Cape Green, the place where actual evidence, physical evidence, scientific evidence is there. But now that's been, my co-author has, whatever he is, ran off. None of this happened. He only met me through sending my book to him and to write. What? We worked together 30 years. This works for the UFO people. Anyway, the orphan lighthouse, they used to blame this whole thing on the lighthouse in England. In fact, the press over here still will bring up the lighthouse, even though they tore it down a few years ago. And they still do. The British press is the worst with the subject. Primitive. They have not evolved since I was public in 1983, the first big press here. I went public in 82. They still write the same UFO spotters, UFO fans, man, and they'll never change. It's a funny little island, I'm telling you. And I will never deal with British media again. Every time they change it, I had to do a lot of them when our book was out and we were touring it. And what you say, though, never is what you said. It's sensationalized. It's the tabloid press. It's disgusting. So anyway, it wasn't the orphan lighthouse. We're not idiots. We're trained observers.
Highly trained, ready to go, ready to fight Russian special forces. What are the odds of you mistaking a goddamn lighthouse? I mean, that just don't insult people's intelligence. I mean, what a ridiculous theory.
And if you saw the lighthouse come up a lot. It became almost a member of my family, that lighthouse. And a joke, but there were people that will still go, wasn't that a lighthouse, Shaw? And man, I never saw a lighthouse fly or move, And if that works and makes you sleep easier, then yeah, we saw a lighthouse that flew in from and that wasn't even in the direction of this amber light that flew in over the far trees. And it came in and it stopped right over this thing. I'm going to get away from this pretty quick. And it exploded just that quick, silently, in a triangular, aiming toward the ground, and arrows, just shards of light and things. I always use that. And it did damage to my eyes and others, documented. Okay. And then there was a thing that kept changing. Now, remember that your state of mind isn't like you and me talking. It's wrong. You're like half step out of yourself watching this, and it still feels like that. And there was this snow-colored or whitish boxes all over it. It's so hard to describe. You'll see an excellent depiction of it, a certain movie we can talk about later, the closest that will ever come. And it kept changing, and then the cameras filmed that. So, whatever this unit was, they've seen things before. Some guys ran, or disappeared behind us. There was a lot of trauma with people. And I think a lot of people don't like talking about all that because we're forces, and it's like, it was life-changing stuff. And we see Gordon Williams, our wing commander. Obviously, he would be out there. Come on, man. I'm going to stay at the Christmas party. You guys deal with that. No, in any logical head, he ran the wing, man. He's coming out. The stuff had been going on 2 days. They all knew about it. The stuff kept coming in and doing its stuff. Near a nuclear base. Hello. But that works for people. And indeed, as much as people hate it, and I'm not the only one. See, I don't have a standalone account. The community will try to make you think that it's not true, not near true. Because if it was true, I wouldn't say it, to be honest. I was really reticent to ever say there was a life form associated with this. Wasn't an alien? I've never said that word because I don't know what an alien is. Was it alive? It looked it. it had a movement. It was separate. There were three in this contained, only our words, Joe, make it sound silly, because you're only left with 4 words to describe this undescribable thing. And there was the faces on them, and they were inside the stuff. No one went up. I've read that they shook hands and we made arrangements. Never happened. It was just kind of this weird. This stuff came out, kind of moved. Never came out doors. It just moved. There were windows, doors. It was boxes and weird red light at top, and it was different. I mean, it was just bizarre. And this bizarreness came out off its surface. It never came out a door or any of that. And just off the ground, it was very little. And that's the big crux. But was there a communication? I don't know. I've always said, if there was, it was what's the telepathy or that? If there was, it was not with me, I mean, at all. But I'm looking at this going, what in God's name? Now, I knew UFOs existed. I have seen things that probably come from when I was a kid in my life. I wish I hadn't, but I had. And I'm not out to prove nothing. I know. See? But this thing was really bizarre. But you're not in your righteous head. Long story short, because I can't extend it any more than that, like we had to get near it. We were near it at one point There's a lot of missing elements of this, because John Burroughs and I talked about this some years ago. He was over. And we don't get along all the time, but I don't have anything against John at all. He's kind of a nice guy, really. But he has his own agenda, his own direction. I wish him well. But even in the book, was wrong on some show. Robert Ball tapped us and said, go back to the vehicles, right? Now, remember, I came out in the vehicle. I don't remember. And in the book, and you've read it, I'm just back on the base and the sun's coming up. It's impossible. But I never paid attention to that for years. I'm like, oh, well, there's only like 8 hours, 6 hours just gone that I can't account for. And others can't either. John could be there. John was out there that night in civvy clothes. They wouldn't let him get up close because he had been through the stuff 2 nights before, and he knew it was coming back. I have no doubt that was true because I saw him out here. And then he had something else happen when I wasn't there, apparently. But there's a lot of weirdness with all the after. Once that phenomena appeared, there are gaps. There's things that don't make sense. Even in the book, I'm like, that was it. We go back. I never said I got back. I don't remember how I got back to the base. I didn't go. I don't remember. And I didn't think of that until John and I talked about it. And that's why they try to keep all the witnesses apart. Because when you get together, things start going off like, oh, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Or, oh, yeah, I remember that. Well, they don't want that, whoever they are. Halt is being one of them, but he's just a figurehead for the thing with teeth, the lion. That runs the show. And you see that reinventing itself daily. The government. It's embarrassing to watch the subject these days.
So when you guys had this phenomenon surrounded, what makes this case so special is you guys had weapons. Did everybody have M16s? What weapons would we have seen if we were in the forest with you approaching this phenomenon? What was everybody armed with?
Okay. Right, you wouldn't have seen any weapons on us because when we got to a clear staging or clearing area on the forestry trails in our vehicles, we couldn't go any further. And if you went there, you'd see even to this day why the land. You couldn't, like Halt claims. I said he drove out onto the. Come on, they just make up everything they can just to make it sound bad, and they're treacherous and traitorous people. But we turned in our weapons, Joe. I had an M16. We turned it into an armor. Our weapons were traced to us through serial numbers. So I stayed with the same weapon every shift I did with one. I didn't just get a different one every night. And we turned them in. I've heard some people had sidearms in certain jobs. I didn't see any weapons because they knew this phenomenon was there and they didn't want to engage it. I believe. We weren't allowed to have weapons on soil outside the base unless we were going between the bases and the cliffs around, etc.
I've seen an interview with someone in Capel Green. He had an M60 machine gun pointed at the phenomenon some distance away from where you were. Is that true?
Okay. Right. That's I think a scene from Capel Green, the fabulous film that will finally be up hopefully later this year. That was a witness, Michael Smith, and that happened actually on Woodbridge, the base. It wasn't in the forest. The way it's and he was, frankly, I got to see that part myself, but it was not in Capel Green in the field. You would never have had that out there. When that's in his posters, you see him in a bunker, and that's on the base. So there were a lot of phenomena that took place. There were beams allegedly fired down to the weapon storage area where we had nuclear weapons, making this extreme defense significance. This is the big heat behind it, by the way, not just a phenomenon. But no, that's just a clip from a film, but it will all be defined when you see Capel Green. In fact, there will be things defined in that film that people are really, well, all I can say is I don't feel bad for certain people, but it's kind of, you feel bad for me, like, oh, wow. But they'll ignore, they'll pretend, they'll go on with their little slanderous and defamation ways, have their little conferences and, be the end. They'll go on, but the film isn't made for them. It's made for the general population, which is real big, like Cannes Film Festival, things like that, not the Laughlin Flying Saucer Award Film Festival, which is cute. That's nice. I wish some filmmakers like Corbell would stay out of his own documentaries. Now do something on Bob Lazar, who I knew Bob Lazar. Whole thing's about Jeremy Corbell and his bare feet, and his cell phones and his dog, which looked very nice. You poor Mickey Rourke. What the hell? And I'm not attacking the guy, but he ain't been friends of mine. I don't know him. But stay out of your own way, man. And that works in this damn subject. Maybe it's for young generation. I'm not a filmmaker, but stay out of your own damn films, will you? Make the movie.
I agree.
Hey,
I agree.
you can cut that if you want. Because, listen.
No,
I
agree.
The guy's part of the whole, cartel of
Information.
UFO. Yes. The Nick Pope led fraudulent, who I've known forever. And it's another slander and defamation at great distance artist. And, I don't want, because people aren't familiar, they'll go, oh, it was pretty negative kind of show, man. But in reality, if people, majority of my friends, family and all, are not part of ufology. They believe in me. They said something happened to them. How could they know exactly what happened? But they're supportive because they know me. That's the only people I'm out for. I'm not out to, and I've met some wonderful people in the field, particularly with witnesses. I'm very fond of the people with too much opinion and too much time to be typing away. Don't have much time for them. Unfortunately, you can't sit and tell me what Rendlesham was if you weren't there. And so many of these people, the critics of Rendlesham, wouldn't get through 1 minute of basic training to start with. And then they call me and it's stolen valor. Can you believe this? I had one of them, the one, the SC. They're so crazy. They believe this stuff. And so this person wrote to the Department of Defense, to the Department of Military Records saying, well, we have the stolen valor guy, meaning me, that claims he's in the Air Force and all. And they wrote back, and she was this person's so wacky, they put it out. And it says, Madam, we protect the privacy of our veterans. We will concern, serve here, there, and there, and is honorably discharged. And then they turn that saying, I must be a government agent. I know people listening, if they're not familiar, go, this can happen. It does happen. And it happens all too often. Your Travis Waltons, it's happened to, your Bob Lazars. These are all people I've known many, many years. I met Bob once, as you know, with John. I've known John Lee in many years, big supporter of mine. And, I don't want to come on here and just, raise hell about this kind of stuff and these kind of people, but I don't think it helps the subject, Joe. I don't see, and what got worse after that incident? We got back, we were debriefed the next day. That was Armed Forces Security Services. No one had heard of them. and ONI, Naval Intelligence. And even Halt verifies that now. How would I know that? And it was a very smart, it wasn't in a secret alien base and all this. It's clearly stated in the book. I don't think some people can read that it was in the Chief of Security Police's office. Small groups, all the rank by your rank, really, right? And we were shown that footage, unnarrated. It was designed to head, play in your head, really was. And the first thing I did is call my late mother with Greg Batram, who was another ex-Marine, by the way. I called my mother and I told her what happened. Now, my mother passed away 4 years ago. And, but she was the one I called, and her friend Sue was right there when I called. I reversed the call. So they knew about this within hours of these events.
Larry, for the listeners, because it's extremely important, I have it underlined 5 times here. Tell us about the video. I mean, this is one of the most spectacular parts of the story. You're all brought in the room. You're all sat down. You have a branch of the NSA, Armed Forces Security Service, in there. Right. You have Department of Naval Intelligence sitting there. You're forced to watch a film. Tell us in detail about this film.
Well, as I remember, well, first thing we did is we signed, the JANAP 146, those type of documents, statements saying we were off duty and saw some lights. And I just saw quick little things, just sign them all in a stack, about 5, and just stack them up. In the office we went. And Mal Ziegler left the office. He knows all this happened. The ONI guy was named Richardson. It has been established he ran ONI in London at that time. I didn't know. I didn't know what ONI was. It wasn't Air Force Office of Special Investigation. They had nothing to do with any of this. They were too low level. And Armed Forces Security Service had no idea what they were, but it turned out they're part of the NSA. Didn't know what the NSA was then. I didn't. CIA, if you told me, even though CIA was on that base too, apparently, in a lot of ways. They did some magical shit on that base after this. But in the end, Joe, we sat down. They told us that what we experienced. And now there were guys melting down. The guy shot himself, all this stuff. See, there's a lot of guilt too with people that were in charge that will have to answer for it. That was my burning thing. What drove you to blow the whistle on this? And some of it was the human end, the bullying, and I don't like them in real life or on the internet or in the Air Force, because they had them there too. Because these people had parents, they wonder. And we sat down, they told us, they didn't say aliens, they said you've seen off-Earth technology or something like that, as the years go on, something off-Earth, I remember. They didn't say aliens, but none of that. They didn't say outer space, they just said you've witnessed something. We have it in hand, we've known about it before any of you in the room was born. I think that's in the book. And we're all in shock. We're also feeling medical effects from being close to an unshielded nuclear device, which I have the records of all that. Other guys have damage. John Burroughs ain't the only one. I've been on record forever. I've all kind of medically documented from exposure to a nuclear source. Well, where did I get that? And but it's all complicated and very long. The film, we're going to show you a film. It was literally, you're too young, but there was no video, man. It was a film like you saw in high school, yeah. And there was a little white board there in the office. I don't think they even had a screen. It was just the white wall they ran. And they showed it, and it began with gun camera footage from Korea era, where you see MiG come up near a saucer, and it just drops down, and it looks like it's filmed from a distance. There was stuff from our moon missions where you're seeing structure and objects sitting on the moon that, frankly, I never saw. And I remember all the moon landings and didn't see any of that. No narration. Stuff from Vietnam still stays with me the most, where you're seeing special operations units, probably MAC SOG up in the highlands and the hills, broad daylight, camera, sim film, color. That was the color one of the color one. and it pans, and you see this, the triangular, the black triangular objects that are not made by us. Sorry, there's no UAP proof that. I mean, no way. It just isn't the case. Well, one of those suckers, because I've seen them anyway, and this was monstrous, comes out, and you could see the canopy that it had come up through below, way down this valley, all the trees and things falling off it. And I'll tell you, to see that that was scary, actually. That was a really scary thing to look at. And some other things, I don't remember all of it. That particular one on the moon with the buggy. So it was around 72. We had the lunar. I knew Ed Mitchell. I met Dr. Mitchell a few times. And that was like meeting a Beatle, really, wasn't it? And fascinating. Those guys, they're the bravest dudes on the planet ever. And yeah, and they showed that, and we were more confused. We left, just like you see in the book. I write those birds flew off that tree. Whenever I'm down there, I still see that big tree where the birds all flew off. And a Vulcan bomber flew over, so I don't know where that had come from. It was just a real deal from then on. And yeah, we had, John Lennon was killed just 2 weeks before that in New York. And it was dark leading up to it for me, particularly my generation. I'm a big Beatle fan, Lennon fan, met him. So it was a bummer. And so there was a real low end. And then you had some of the hillbillies saying, well, he was a communist. Don't forget that one. I would have been thrown out. But so it was all that era, and people don't know the history. Jimmy Carter was still the president. He was the outgoing. It wasn't Ronald Reagan yet. Reagan was the president-elect. Jimmy Carter. This is how long, folks, this is. And Joe, I'll tell you, with the way I see in what are they calling UFOs now? UAP? Sorry, it's been UFO for over 70 years. Go out in the street and ask any given person you find, kids, and say, what do you think of this UAP deal? No, they'll probably hit you. No one knows what that is. That's a rewrite, and UFO subject did not begin with the Tic Tac video or whatever it is in 2014. Because my thing happened 42 years ago in December. And, the great Betty and Barney. I bet kids don't even know about this stuff. They don't know about great researchers, Stan Friedman. I knew J. Allen Hynek. He coined close encounters up to how many times now? 1 million. The kids don't know any of this. They know the bare feet narrators. They know the woke speakers. They know the cancel culture that in the subject. And frankly, there are people my age and older practicing that spew out any old bullshit and never be asked to provide an inch of proof.
Well, before we get into that, I think one thing I'd like to get into is this film that you were shown, and the NSA guys and the Department of Naval Intelligence guys in the room, because this is like the meat of the story, in my opinion, because they're basically giving you what disclosure would look like if it were to happen. The guy said to you, I believe the NSA guy said, this phenomenon, some of it comes and goes. Some of it has been here since the beginning of time, and some of them are just passing through. Can you get into that a little bit?
Well, that is pretty. And remember, I wrote that book, my parts in it, because I don't like to write. I wrote all that, by the way. I didn't have someone write it for me like I've read. So that was in my 20s, so my memory would have been more concise. When I wrote that chapter. It didn't come out when I was 30, but I got them out of the way. So we were so confused. I didn't sit there going, Joe, that this is disclosure. I don't even know if I knew that word back then, but we were in shock, man. We were in shock. I had metallic taste in my mouth. My eyes were watering nonstop. They didn't give a goddamn about effects. All they cared about is dreams. And we're supposed to, I don't know if that's in the book, we were supposed to call a number, I never did, from our day room, this number, which would have been on the base, and call this number if we had certain dreams. They wanted to monitor dreams. If you've had any dreams, they didn't say, well, if your hair is falling out, or if your teeth are falling out. They didn't care about that at all. They didn't care. We had guys go AWOL after that. We had a guy, a friend of mine, became a mercenary, cut himself with a knife just to get the hell out and all this. And, so I think that so to think about it and give it a lot of thought, because I was in shock and I just wanted my mother, I wanted it just got dark, man. And it wasn't a fun thing at all. I know a lot of people are in this for a social thing. That's great. Or they come and look at people like us for entertainment. That's not so great because they don't think of what goes on behind it. I don't think they should be involved in the subject.
Right. I mean, your buddy Alabama didn't make it. This isn't entertainment.
Oh, Russell, man. His real name was Russell. Well, no, he didn't. I blame Halt for that and all. They don't deny it. They don't. It's just, and I don't know what he went AWOL, came back. I'm not going to go into that. He did what he did, and there's a chain of command. There's a chain of responsibility, and that's another big part of this cover-up because it costs lives too. And God knows what lives and what it's done to people. And believe me, it's done. Forget me. I am the whistleblower of this. No one else. It was me. I'm proud of it because no one else has had the stones to do it, especially in this. But do we have to go on more of the film? Because to this day, I don't know. I can picture it, but was it psychological warfare? Was it? I just don't know. Because we did go through some things where there was injections. Apparently, I don't remember injections. And you'll read this really bizarre. I think they did try to put in things that if we ever talked about this, we'd sound like, remember this 1980, 81, raving lunatics. UFOs was still kind of, if you saw one, you just didn't even tell your friends back then. It was well, you've been drinking, that kind of thing. My mother and I had some amazing things, but we just kept it quiet. I'm not even sure if my mother read the book because she didn't want to see what happened to her son. I know my sister did and said we didn't name her after the Fruit Loop box. Toucan Steel, call her Sam, and that was her big complaint. I'm like, Jesus, there's more to it. I put too much in my family, and that gave bullets to these scumbags that are running the subject now, or think they are. But away from that, I can't really go any further on that because it's just a memory of that and what it was, what was the dynamic to it, what did they want to get out of it. I think psychological warfare. I think it was authentic stuff because it was just too haphazard the way it was done, the film. And it was those times. It was no high CGI back then, at all that I'm aware of.
Not that good. So moving away from that, but
Thank you.
But right close to that topic, they told you about the dreams thing. These are questions, and like I've said, I've listened to every interview with you that there pretty much is, other than that Art Bell one from way back in the day. And if anybody's listening that has this old Art Bell interview with Larry Warren, please share it with us because we've been looking for this interview. Do you have any thoughts? It's been 40 years. What did they mean about the dreams? Why were they so concerned with your dreams?
Right. By the way, I did a lot of Art Bell shows, but that there was that one with John Lear, I think you did, right? From when it was Talk of the West. That was in the 80s. You kids. Dreams that might have been, was there any this phenomena wasn't trying to, I believe in dreams. I think there's the alpha state. I see my mother, I've seen deceased friends, and there's no question in my mind. Personally, I believe there's more to life than this. There better be, but I think there is. I think there's that paranormal thing that's a way to communicate by all kinds of things. Though I wouldn't give my government or this government here in Britain any high thinking credit, but it could have been. I think they're aware that these phenomena can communicate in multiple ways, and they didn't want them, probably the phenomena, creating a what is it called, double agent type thing, because I think it is a threat. It's a definite threat. Not all of it. I think there's many things here and representing many different agendas. And I have just opinions like everyone else, but I have to slander other people to express them. You know, kind of an art you can learn as you grow up. But yeah, I think it was probably just to see if, and I wasn't the only one that will say this to you that went through it, that they were concerned with dreams. Yeah. I never had any that I knew of or remember them. Though I do dream of the Rendlesham thing sometimes, and you know, because I'm still stuck in it in a way, aren't I? And I always will be. We're going through the forest, and frankly, Halt's there, and I wasn't with him all that night. But there's a lot of high strangeness with the thing. It's almost, Joe, looking back, like this is part of central casting a script from your life, and it was all just going to happen anyway. It's very strange. Yeah. So you get a little, I don't go too far out. I'm actually a pretty conservative guy. I know UFOs exist. Are they from other planets? Probably. I don't know. Are they other dimensional? Oh, I think so. You know, do Bigfoot exist? Damn right they do. I saw one with my mother on the New York Thruway midday. And when these are the things in 75, July 7th, and never forget it. And New York, by the way, not out, you guys don't have all the Bigfoot fun. And it's rich with them on the East Coast. And there it was, and it didn't care. I think those things are from somewhere else personally. It didn't care. It was in the river, Seneca River, and we were going over the overpass, and it was 100 degrees out. A lot of guns in New York State. We don't dress up. Well, number one, you find a 10-foot guy to do it. Beautiful, smooth, reddish hair, dark face, but it reminded me of a 10-foot tall American Indian, a native. Isn't that something? Very brief, all the traffic slowing down. And I always wish I could stop, you know, or pulled over, you know, because it would have been on across this small river. So we'd have been safe. But it looked like it was hunting something. It didn't, was oblivious. So when you see these kind of things, you didn't go running out and tell your friends. We're heading to Niagara Falls for a weekend. And I remember that weekend because I got food poisoning. Oh, God, I did. And we never forgot that, but we didn't talk about it always. But now in the new world, this modern world, you know, and I hear the Bigfoot groupies and community is as vicious as UFOs. Geez, I ain't going near them folks, but they exist. Definitely
Absolutely.
exist. And it's stunning because New York State police were in front of them. They slowed down and it just, but you see that feeling, I'm not supposed to see this. You know, when you see any kind of phenomena, and I think it's all linked somewhere, you know, and we'll when we die, we'll probably find out there was one big joke on us, man. The laugh's been on us because we're so important, aren't we? We're so on top of it all, but we're not near it, man. So it's fascinating. And that's where I think the dream thing might have been. It's just a guess.
It's my understanding that a 38 special was fired at the phenomenon. Can you make comments on the pistol that was actually fired at the phenomenon?
You know what? I can't go there because it's part of something I wasn't involved in, and it's something that will come to the fore this year in the film Cable Green, a Dion Johnson film. And I'm not being coy on that. It's just that I know where you're coming from, but the person involved, the whole thing, I can't go into that because I didn't even know the depth of things. I wasn't present. So we can pick up on that, you know.
Can you confirm that a weapon was fired at the phenomenon or deny?
On one of the nights, yeah, apparently. Yeah.
Now, obviously, this was no lighthouse. This was no SAS prank. This is a highly trained military personnel firing a weapon at something that was perceived to be a threat to their life.
Absolutely well said on that. The people that debriefed us never came and said, I'm sorry to you and all the other guys at all. And we don't need Nick Pope to come in years ago because he's a dogs will be dogs, as we said. He, you know, and apologizing. Nick Pope was a schoolboy when the Rendlesham Forest incident happened. He presents like he was in government at that time. He was not. I was in his office at the MOD in 1995. I've known him before anyone knew. He was not a spokesman for anything. He did not know about the Rendlesham thing. He was 14 when it happened. But the community allows this sort of BS to go unchecked. The TV shows love him, man. He must be. But in England, his ticket's punched, his gate's punched. But yeah, anything. Let's bring it up to date. And your show, man. I get all tangled up in blue.
I'd like to get into the nuclear weapons ordinance that were possibly affected by the UFOs that night. Can you speak in detail about what you know about that? And I know this is a huge part of the cover-up was the fact that you even had nuclear weapons there, but of course you did, obviously you did. What do you know about the UFOs affecting the ordinance that night, the nuclear weapons?
Well, that was on Bentwaters, and I didn't get near any of that. I didn't see the beams come down. That is hearsay. Okay. Halt told us off. It made us turn. I met with Halt in '93 in Washington, and the other guy I wrote the book with, and the late Bob Exner, who passed away, the researcher. I thought he was a fun guy. I like Bob very much. God rest his soul. We met Halt. Halt said, turn the tape off. I'm not a researcher. I don't carry tape. I don't give a damn. I don't need to be a researcher, right? Turn the tapes off. And that's when Halt said, the other guy with the book with, do you know this adversely affected the ordinance? Well, I didn't know that at all. And it has been suggested by others. However, what I can tell you, so that's hearsay in me. I don't know it firsthand. I know we had nuclear teams come on the base right after, containment teams, all this on Bentwaters. Woodbridge had containment for the UFO thing on their end of the runway. Halt, no one could get near their aircraft at all. That's what he says. Me, I don't know that. What I did know is we had nukes. I got sick of hearing we didn't have nukes. So in 95 or something over here, I was before our book. We were speaking in Nottingham, I think, and I said, "Well, if it's no defense significance, we had nuclear weapons." So I'm the first guy that ever said we did, and that's kind of like breaking your oath and all. I wouldn't do anything, but I got sick of this, and the bases were long closed. Well, sure enough, and here we go with the community again. Thanks for all the help, folks. I am the only guy that had his United States passport taken off him, and not being a felon, by the way. I went to renew it. They seized it. They said it was because I spoke about sensitive defense issues in a public forum on foreign soil. This is a fact all through the State Department. Well, and I will give the co-author credit on this, because I'm like, and I was supposed to come over and do some TV work with Timothy Good. You might know of him. I don't know if the kid.
Absolutely. Fantastic guy. Fantastic guy.
Yeah, he did Above Top Secret and all. Can you hear me, Joe? It just went bing.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can. It just pinged or binged or something. Old ears, So this is another thing where I don't know how you have to lose an arm or something. They'll still, he wasn't in the service. Okay, why do I bother with this stuff? But yeah, I had my passport taken off May for about a year. I'm not a felon. It violated my civil and constitutional rights as an American citizen.
Like you're in North Korea or something. They're treating you like you're in North Korea or something.
Yeah. It was the only time that I'm aware of that it's ever happened to an alleged UFO whistleblower. Of course it would, but it's not true if I said it didn't happen. I don't know what it is, and it's happened. That's just my luck. And I'm not unique, Joe. I'm not unique. There's so many people out there. I just went through the thing that's, well known now, and it should be, because it's people have a right to know what went on. It's also a great window on history of the times at that time. And so, I know them all. I mean, we could do shows on, you name it. And it was a lot more class in the work then. That's why I like you, man. You sharp ace. You're like it used to be, even though you're a young fella. Me, when I showed up, it was like Keith Moon came on the scene. The parties in the hotel rooms, you name it, it all went down. Because I had a ball. I know a lot of great people. I get up, but you have to understand, and I understand better now. I did a lot of the conferences back then to, number one, travel certain place I've never been, Japan. I've been all over the world with this thing that I never would have seen. A lot of America, I never would have seen different parts. A lot of people I never would have met in my life that I was aware of. You know, I read the books. And so it all, there's a lot of good with it. I was betrayed in the utmost by, you know, someone, and I worked with for 30 years that now says he never met me or something. I guess I have to consider the people that would believe that are probably even more frightening. But in the end, really, it led me to my son. I try to. It's not a healthy thing, you know, because I get pissed off, rightfully. I don't like other people going through crap. Travis goes through it still to this day. But it's true. You know, the other thing is, I will say, and I'm allowed to say this, is out of the Rendlesham for I've been voice stress analyzed 5 times, once by former or law enforcement. I passed every one of them. CNN wanted it. No other Rendlesham, a couple Rendlesham guys have shown deception when they've done them.
I'd like to note in here, Sasha and Peter Robbins both refused to do what you have done as far as deception detection.
Right. I didn't know they asked her. She's just an internet troll kind of girl. But
she claimed
the other one.
She claims that she takes blood pressure medication so that she can't take a polygraph. But taking blood pressure medication would help you pass a polygraph. So the whole story just doesn't make sense. I think it's disgusting that they could attempt to slander a United States serviceman who was honorably discharged from the United States Air Force.
Well, yeah, you know, he says I lied and he got rid of the book. As you know, that story is not true. I pulled the book and along with him because I'm not going to go into it. It was business things on, well, pretty dishonest business stuff, but you know, and I pulled it. You have the document there. The book was not pulled by the publisher because I didn't want to pull it, but I could not keep that relationship going. I think there was resentment on my other counterparts' behalf. We've been through it all. Our first publisher robbed us blind. At least I was robbed. I don't know. I'm sure, well, maybe he wasn't. I don't know. Second publisher rewrote it. All kind of, I won't go into here. It's past, and it's, but the story is that it was pulled, and because I lied, Nick Pope loves it. You have the document from the publisher. It was pulled because I'm in the Library of Congress and the British Library. I'm the principal author. I named the book. I began it way before Peter Robbins. Did he bring good things to it? Yes. Did he put things in that probably shouldn't have gone? Yeah, I had an agent that wanted me to drop him, but I wouldn't do that to someone.
I'd like to add one thing about Peter as well, because I find it disgusting the way that they've both treated you. If Peter is so steadfast on claiming that you are making all of this up and that the entire left at Eastgate is just full of shit, why is Peter Robbins still selling copies of Left at Eastgate?
Well, he was. He's probably out of them now. Yeah, well, what does that say about him where he calls himself an investigative writer? He's in England right now. He's across the country in Halt. Hadn't been here for a long time, and he's at a conference with that ilk of people. This is what he works in now. It didn't work out with the Nick Pope and all the TV shows he thought he was going to get by slamming me. He got used too in the end. But the thing is with her, that was someone that just came out of nowhere. English. It's in England. England has some of the worst trolls in the world. The worst around the subject. I haven't lived in the States in years. I'm sure there's a bunch of flakes that way too. But the main thing is, and she's irrelevant, but very clever and damaging. Take a fact and rewrite it to the point where I'll tell you, you're like, wow, like this. And it cost me a lot, man. It did. Then came a movie. So but really, I wouldn't undermine her twisted intellect, though, not at all. But she ain't that smart. in the end, also, I am the only Rendlesham person to be polygraphed. Not by a, Jerry Springer type polygraph app. The #1 examiner in the United Kingdom who does MOD clearance work, SAS clearance work, Special Forces, their annual. No dog in the fight, knew someone through someone, the film. And I can tell you a few things about the film if you want, because that was born in the middle of me. I'll tell you, I was getting hit from every side on the internet, and it did cross over to my regular life. I mean, all kinds of stuff. They're quite clever, and you don't need the government to do it. But I am the only witness to the Rendlesham thing that's ever taken a polygraph, let alone passed it at the highest level you can. And did I think and I've always wanted, CNN wanted to in the 80s, and then the examiner backed out when he found out it was about UFOs. This person, Patricia, who happened to be American, was in London. Her husband used to produce the Michael Palin Around the World series. That was interesting. And we all filmed. The movie, long story short, I run into this Dion Johnson, this Australian director, lives in England. It's a long story. You'll see it all come out. And we're at this camp out thing with Tino, a friend of mine, and we're in the forest hanging out with this group from Staffordshire, Nottingham, but I forget who was there now. And it was a very repressive campsite. We all had to be asleep by it's so bad. And I took people around the forest, and I run into this guy filming and blah, blah, blah. What it led to, this meeting by chance, this little daughter interviewed me for a little school project. She's like, and he said, would you mind? I can't. I said, oh, for a kid, sure I will. Get a phone call. I want to do a movie about your thing. And I go, really? That was another thing Mr. Robbins was mad about, because these Canadian guys, the Canadians actually proved, they have all the lists that we had 100,000, we had 100 nuclear weapons on Bentwaters in 1990. The Canadians actually produced the documentary UFO Red Alert. But this guy was going to do the same, but never contacted me. And so Peter said, I blew it also. It was a lot of business ends. It's like Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis, Lennon and McCartney, except minus them. At least I didn't get the money. And maybe I'll do the Jerry Lewis telephone one day, and Peter will come on with me. We can sing an old song. Anyway, I don't wish any ill. It's been around. We had a lot of laughs, but the weakness, it's always the weakness in this, and the resentments and the envies, and believe me. And, someone that calls themselves an investigative journalist and writer, I didn't know who the hell he was when I met him. Knew his sister was. Great person, wonderful family is. Him, not so good. Calling me a mother effer when I'm at my mother's deathbed. These are what these people are like on a podcast who the mic thing was open still. And he knew I was in the States for that. Now, that's all you need to hear, because I thought his family was wonderful. Still do. But away from him, I took the polygraph on a contingent. That is how the movie would move forward. On me passing, obviously, because we have Academy Award-winning cameramen. We have the best of the best in the business, all for free. They all worked on this thing. The actors, everyone. The witnesses that people are going to shit their pants, Capel Green, that I can't talk about. There's so many new points that it's really going to cause waves. Not just about me. I mean, yes, it's the focus on me. If you look on IMDb, we're like 30-something on anticipated movies. I know everyone's waiting. It's a very emotive case, isn't it? It's not like James Fox's movies. Some of them take 8 years. He's a nice guy. Seems really nice. Part of the circle, though, but never hear negatives, bad things. But he has big money behind him. We kept all that away because we didn't want the narrative to be poisoned, misdirected, reworked, and lighthouses appearing, and the Nick Popes, the things, always the spokesman, the 14-year-old when it happened. So that launched the film. The film was a very small movie. It grew to be something that is worthy of any major studio in Hollywood, all done off the back. I obviously can't go into a lot. People, it's taken years. Well, when you have one guy with the vision, I shot all my stuff a long time ago. there was just so many. And the funny story of the film, Dion Espy, and we have such a great crew. It's been frustrating. It's been a few fallouts, issues with people, and it's normal. Not with me, but it's been, and it's just frustrating wanting it out. Because the people involved in it aren't part of the UFO game or all these Discovery Channels or ancient aliens and all that stuff. Though I love Giorgio with his hair. I've met him. He's one of the best lecturers I've ever heard was that Giorgio, the Greek name, I forget, but nice kid. He's a nice guy. Gave me a little ancient alien pin, which I lost. One real quick thing, Joe, on that. I love the people that go, but particularly the internet types, the experts. Well, polygraphs, all these experts, I've never even seen a polygraph conducted. I had never. And I said, isn't that funny? Because had I failed, you'd be the first one praising how accurate polygraphs are. Yeah. So what were you?
Very fair point. Well, this is a fun part of the story, and this is just something that you can't even make up. I mean, this is just such a fun part of the story. I'm sorry, but I have to take you back to the room with the NSA boys at the very end of that video you were shown. They told you, listen now, if any of you speaks about this, bullets are cheap. Your mail's going to be monitored. Your phones are going to be monitored. So just play ball with us and we're going to make your life great. Almost as soon as you get out of the meeting, and like I said, you can't make this up because it's like something I would do. You pick up Larry Warren picks up the phone. Hey, Mom, guess what I saw last night?
True, yeah. And my mother's friend. Well, you'll see a lot about that in the movie. My mother's very good friend. Now, my mom's not on Earth now, but I was very lucky that she. You'll hear my mother talk about that in the movie. Luckily enough, and you'll hear her friend that was there when I called. And believe me, those are two women you wouldn't want to play chess with, UFO community, living or dead, just a warning. But that happened, and I was with Greg Batram, who I haven't spoken to. But yeah, I called her, and then I wrote her a letter, and I wrote my letter to my mother on January 7th, which predates the Halt memo. I wrote, which looks like the Halt memo. I was trying to be very clever at 19, who I can get by them. And I took it to the base post office, the APO, and I sent it to her. Well, I have that letter still exists to this day. I've given it as a gift to the lead researcher on the film, Gary Hazeltine, because he did amazing work that no other so-called researchers seem to be able to do in 42 years. But he's a retired detective, so they tend to know how to really do research. And I gave that to him, but the actual letter, and I like an idiot, I didn't seal it because I had to pick up pictures to put in it. Not of the incident, just unrelated. It's a 7-page letter or something, 5-page. And my handwriting's dreadful. And at the end, I had to grab a pen off the counter. I said, I can't tell you any more about it in the mail, Ma. They read it. And so I mailed it, and it got through. It got to my mother. As far as I know, it was the original envelope exists. It's out there. It's physical. You'll probably see it in the film. I don't have it here because I gave it to someone as a gift, and it is the first written record of the Rendlesham event at all that is known. The authentic, original written record. Why my co-author never even thought with the great research abilities that should be in the book. I'm not a researcher. I didn't think of it. Well, though I think the film will really make it much easier for me not to really have to. I don't really have to anyway. I don't do these things in this field. Now I imagine I definitely be working with you when the movie's out, because we're gonna have to work it. But I can name a lot of podcast types. I've done all their shows. I won't name them. I wouldn't give them 2 blinks of an eye because they're all part of the coffee clutch. Even if it's factual, if it goes against the circle, they won't breach it. And that's a thing that needs one day if the subject's to get a hot inch ahead of where it is, instead of this giant ego turkey hunt that's really bad now, you probably see it more than I do, you know. Uh, it's frightening. It's scary. I mean, we all have egos, but when you have to bring down other people or lie and defame other people, not just me, other people go through it. I know it's a cancel culture. And I have to say that SC woman you mentioned was that doesn't deserve much more than that mention. Actually, probably invented the cancel culture. I literally think she created it, because then it began. Then they started in on Trump. Then they started. Listen, I probably was neck and neck with Trump on the slander and defamation. I didn't have a Russian connection allegedly, but we the subject is dire. Not being a researcher, I don't have some new information every year. I have life observations about the subject, not politically correct. But Joe, if you read the book, and I started that book in 1986, long before the co-author. I had a different co-author, but he was a little too old and conservative. Now I'm old and conservative, so that's what you get. And the book is not favorable toward the ufology mentality, is it?
Nor should it be. Nor should it be. I mean,
no, on my end. So that didn't make the, let's send Larry a Christmas card every year. I'll tell you, I do Philip Glass, the arch debunker, and still loved out came the tape recorder and his little hat like Kojak, and not Kojak, but the Night Stalker, Kolchak. You weren't alive yet. It was a great show. And he'd go, well, and he was very cool guy, aviation week. He was, for the younger people, he was the arch debunker. He'd attack women, he would everything. So he was quite friendly when you're talking to him. He invited me on his boat on Chesapeake Bay. I said I'd never get back to Florida. So him being Jewish, I would send him after that, because he started to write really bad. I was a drug-crazed hippie because of I was around the music biz and I liked music. And so I must be a drug-addicted hippie. And that was so funny. But people like him, he's long dead. I'd send him a Christmas card every Christmas, even though he was Jewish. I knew I loved it. I said, thinking of you, Phil. And that's not an anti-Semitic thing to the woke crowd. That's just a joke, man. Bill Murray just got canceled. Everyone's canceled. I'm in the cancel fan. I love that, man. Only the elite. Look what's left. Look what's left. The people after all the canceled people are out of the way. Look what's left, man. Isn't it staggering? It's so funny. You can make shows about these people. The film isn't friendly to ufology at all. It's all the way behind UFOs. And you won't hear UAP mentioned once, because no one knows what the hell it is. And it's a distraction and a rewrite to get the general public confused. We're going to be all up front with you. Now, here's another thing about the UFO community, right? In this country, they always rely on America over here, but because England is just tabloid crap. I don't think they even know over here what's going on with the stuff, or want to. Not the people, but the feds, the government. They demand. I was part of the disclosure event in 2001 at the National Press Club. Stephen Greer put it on. I did not, and my guys did not subscribe to any of his and his group's philosophies. I'm not putting him down. He was a man of his word, flew me over for that. I was living here then. I was honored to be part of it. It was the largest press attendance in the National Press Club's history. Even with speaking presidents, it was very prestigious. And it wasn't just that event. We lobbied Congress. We spent a whole week doing all kinds. It was an education.
I understand that they're in Washington, D.C., 2001, summer, total NSA, CIA spook fest. Am I correct?
100%. It was May of 2001, a few months before September 11th happened. Very different world. Absolutely. They all had their pins. A lot of them took lunch breaks to come over and watch. We had half the Republican National Committee from another it's a big tall office building. It's not in the middle of DC, and it was a giant conference room. They did the conference on disclosure. Another one with Steve Bassett and all in 2010, but they didn't have near the print, nothing. It was massive, this thing, and it went nowhere. But yeah, it was CIA. I had guys from the agency introduce themselves to me. They go, "We want to know what's going on too." Yeah, there was nothing nefarious. However, the live, and listen, I'm not a tech guy, though I hear I'm a, what am I, a Photoshopper and master of forgery. Anyway, that's my other personality. There was a satellite uplink. This had nothing to do with ufology and those people. And the whole thing was going to go to people's computers. You know, there were like 5 million people. The first half hour was jammed from within the Beltway. All the texts go, "We can't believe this. We're being jammed from within the Washington, D.C. Beltway." They call it a circular highway. And we were intentionally jammed, and they lost a big chunk of that internet audience. That night, I was in the D.C. Hilton. It was the place where Reagan got shot by Hinckley in 1981 when I was at Bentwaters. That was a bit haunting walking by that. You know, Joe, at that, I saw, it would have been Bush 2. He was new in office. I'm up on the upper part of the DC Hilton, the upper roadway thing, and smoking with, I think, the head of Boeing or what are they? We had some heavyweights at the, and there's the big Marine One, broad daylight, coming down the hill toward the White House. And he goes, "Oh, the president's going to be on that, definitely." And it, going down, and just coming up to it, broad daylight, was a sphere, silver sphere, went right up the helicopter, dropped under it, and went right under it on its way. And we both, I said, "Did you see that?" He goes, "Yep." We said, "We're not," he said, "I'm not saying nothing." We saw it happen. And I can't believe that's 21 years ago. I can't. Ufology, a lot of the big names at the time were upset because they weren't invited to it. And because I have to give some credit, they didn't want the circus element to it. You know, people selling crystals in the hallway of the National. One guy did try to sell his audio tapes. I'm like, "Oh no," but bless his heart, nice guy. And but the rest weren't from that world. And the Air Force guys, the offices and all, they said, "Larry, the highest honor I had is, Larry, we read your book. That's a big reason why we're here." And I'm like, wow. So you never know who reached until you get canceled.
That's right. And, you know, I'd like to take a moment. I know a lot of people just have disagreements with the man, Dr. Stephen Greer. If it wasn't for the work he did on serious disclosure and interviewing you, this interview wouldn't be happening. Now, a lot of people have disagreements with so much about Dr. Greer, but you know what? That's neither here nor there. If you take a hard look at what that man has done in the last 3 decades, I think that it stands for itself and it stands the test of time. Now, you know, you can pick apart his personality and this and that. That's neither here nor there.
You can pick apart my personality.
Right. Exactly. We could do that all day. But if you take a hard look,
that could be our next show.
It could be. Let's just pick each other apart.
Pick apart my person.
You know,
let's just attack. Let the dog decide.
The man has.
But yeah,
the man has put in a lot towards ufology, and what he did at the National Press Club made history in Washington, D.C. He has pushed disclosure forward significantly. So, you know, people can have all the disagreements they want with him. I've never met the man personally, but I'd like to acknowledge, number one, if it wasn't for him, you and I wouldn't be talking today, probably.
That would have been a loss. Absolutely. And that was well said. I mean, found him very nice. He was a man of his word. And I think a lot of the angst he gets, and I think he has the same views of the voices of the subject, let's put it that way. I've called them other things. Is that he didn't involve them at all. He sees them a lot the way I do. My only difference in the Air Force people I hung with, military guys, were far outranking me, ever, believe me, was that we wanted to just focus on that one thing, not the secondary agenda that his group, even though they were the bank on that whole thing, took care of everything we needed, everything. We weren't paid for it. Flown over, his word was good. And I can't say the same about a lot of people. and the subject. So that was very well said. But when I say I just want to stick with, I'll go to Congress, raise my damn hand if they ever arrest, swear on the Bible. And that's all I can do. And also I called for, when I was at that podium at the MPC, I only had one thing where I stood up, didn't have it written. I just made it up. And I said, well, they'll use that. I just said what came to mind. How's that? Because then it will be voice planted into Rendlesham. Oh, I made it up. No, they'll do it. You know it. And that's all I want to do. Have other people come forward. I said, people live near DC. This is ongoing all day. Get your cars, come here. I said, halt, everyone, come here. And they didn't. And, it's scary to people when you out people too that probably don't want to be. And I didn't do it on purpose. That's a lot of his angst, Now he says I'm on the run from the Casa Nostra. I ran a giant baseball sporting goods forgery thing. I never dealt with sporting goods. I don't know. They just come up with it all based on a one little woman from Leeds in England. Isn't she special? Amazing. But well said on Stephen Greer, because he was a man of his word. And I was very honored to be part of that day with those witnesses, the real witnesses, not researchers and people with ideas and thoughts and opinions. We've lived there. We printed the T-shirt that they all write about.